My name is Tim Blumentritt, and this presentation covers the Five Forces model. Porter's Five Forces model is a tool for understanding industry conditions and how those conditions influence a firm's choice of strategic position and ultimately its performance. It is the central component of external analysis. Over time, industries generate dissimilar rates of return, and those differentials persist. For instance, over 5 recent years, the soft drinks industry has much stronger returns than the pharmaceuticals industry, which itself had stronger returns than the fast food industry. One could question why this happens. It would seem to be rational for companies to leave underperforming industries and redirect their efforts to high-performing industries in an effort to grab a share of those stronger returns, even if the shifts take a while to make. And if those moves happen regularly over the years, we would expect the average rate of return for any industry to regress to some sort of mean for the entire economy. But that's not what happens. This is the question that framed the early work of Michael Porter, one of the most influential scholars in the field of strategy. Porter was trained as an industrial organization economist, which means he was an economist who studies how industries work. He was interested in why some industries earn consistently above average or below average rates of return on investments. His response was the Five Forces model. It is the most enduring framework for industry analysis in the field. The forces in this model are structural characteristics of an industry that make its performance sticky or prone to be steady over time. The forces are the rivalry among competitors, the threat of potential entrants, the presence of substitutes, and the bargaining power of both buyers and suppliers. Generally, the stronger is a force, the more negatively it impacts the average returns of an industry. Please note that the Five Forces model focuses on analyzing industries, entire groups of companies, not on any one company in particular. That is, you can say an industry faces strong or weak threat of new entrants, but not that any one firm faces a threat of new entrants. At the end of this presentation, we'll discuss how strategic decision makers employ this industry analysis in strategizing for their particular firm. But firms are not the focus here, industries are. So let's go through each of the five forces, starting with the box in the middle, rivals. This box considers how firms in the industry interact with one another. Actually, the word rivals can be misleading. A less confusing term for this box would be industry competitors. According to Porter's formulation, the impact of rivalry increases and thus lowers average industry profitability when the industry is comprised of similarly sized firms, it has slow or negative growth, the firms in industry face high fixed costs and exit barriers, have excess capacity, or sell perishable products or services. All of these elements means that the firms in the industry have incentives to sell everything they produce, even if margins are low. Generalizing, the more firms in an industry compete directly head-to-head and based on price rather than on product features, the greater the rivalry, and the lower the industry profitability. Interactions between buyers of and sellers to an industry are based on bargaining power, or the power to determine the terms of business activities between the groups. Let's start with buyers. According to Porter's formulation, the bargaining power of buyers increases when there are only a few major buyers of an industry's offerings. The industry's products and services are mostly undifferentiated. Buyers can easily switch among providers, and there is a credible threat that the buyers could backward integrate and start doing the industry's activities themselves. When these factors are present, it means that a buyer has the power to set the terms of negotiations with the firms in the industry. As an example, consider the firms that make paper products, such as napkins and paper towels and the like. The buyers here would be retailers that sell paper products to consumers, such as Walmart and Target, companies that tend to be very large and very powerful. The volume that these buyers purchase puts them in an excellent bargaining position. How can the firms in an industry respond? By doing everything they can to counter those forces. First, not all types of buyers are the same. Segmenting a market can help an industry tailor its offerings to particular needs. Further, instead of selling generic products, they can add brand names that consumers are attracted to. they can add features to their products and services, and they can adjust pricing to favorable conditions. The same types of interactions happen with suppliers. The suppliers to an industry are more powerful for the same reasons that buyers are more or less powerful, just flipped around. Again, we have to recognize that there are nuances within these groups. Just as the firms within an industry might sell to a variety of customer segments, so might they purchase goods from many different types of suppliers. This means that the single box for suppliers and the single box for buyers really represent a variety of actors, each of which may have different levels of bargaining power. Note that a firm's employees are a type of supplier. In this case, we are not talking about individual people. That is, instead of considering whether one person as an accountant would be a better hire than another person as an accountant, the focus here would be on the availability of accountants in general. Potential entrants and substitutes are similar in that they both examine groups of companies that could become alternatives to current incumbents in the industry, but they operate in very different ways. Potential new entrants are companies that are not currently active in the industry, but could enter it by producing the same products and services as the current industry competitors. The impact on an industry's performance of potential entrants is based on two factors: barriers to entry and the threat of retaliation. Barriers to entry are simply the costs associated with getting into an industry, such as the investments needed to achieve production scales and to build customer relationships. The capacity to retaliate exists when the incumbents of an industry have the resources to put up a fight against a new entrant. Knowing that they will face a fight, the potential new entrant may choose not to enter the industry. If a new airline considered establishing a foothold in the Atlanta market, we could be nearly certain that both Delta and Southwest would immediately drop their fares to whatever cities the new airline hoped to serve. Substitutes, on the other hand, are defined as companies that sell different products or services that serve the same customer needs or wants as the industry's products or services. The key to the power of substitutes is the price-to-performance ratio between the substitute's offerings and the industry's offerings. As that ratio approaches 1, meaning customers can satisfy their wants or needs equally with the substitute or the industry's products, the power of the substitute increases. For instance, glass, plastic, and aluminum are all suitable for making containers that hold soft drinks. But even as they serve the same purpose, they are all very different products, made with different materials and through different processes. As such, they are substitutes for one another. Like potential entrants, greater challenges from substitutes are associated with a lower level of industry profitability. So those are the 5 forces. A few other points. First, a good 5 forces analysis absolutely depends on a tight definition of the industry being analyzed. This is because the definition defines how you treat companies within it. Take, for instance, the example of Tesla in the auto industry. Tesla was founded in 2003. If we defined the auto industry at that time as including any type of car, Tesla would have been a new entrant when it started, one that successfully overcame the barriers to entry and any potential retaliation. If, however, we define the industry as cars with traditional internal combustion engines, then Tesla would have been a substitute. Therefore, a slightly different definition of the auto industry drastically changes how Tesla would have been treated in the 5 forces analysis. Next, Porter considered the influence of governments and complementers on industry performance, but called them factors rather than forces. In regulated industries such as healthcare and utilities, governments can significantly impact strategic decisions and firm performance. Complementers are companies that help make an industry's product or services stronger or more valuable. Markets for things like huge televisions, home theater surround sound systems, and video streaming services mutually influence each other's profitability because they work well together, even if they're different industries. Last, each of the 5 forces themselves tends to be persistent, meaning that they don't change very quickly for established industries. This makes average profitability rates for an industry sticky over time. However, there are instances in which disruptions happen to one or more of an industry's forces that significantly impacts how competition works. Most of these disruptions tend to arrive as substitutes, such as rideshare companies as alternative to taxis, or how AI is likely to shift the internet search business. Up to now, this presentation has discussed industry-level dynamics. Let's transition to how firms utilize industry analysis in strategic decision-making for their particular firms. Even if the forces are the same for every firm in the industry, that does not mean they all have to respond to them the same way. A firm's strategic position describes how it chooses to deal with the forces, such as its pricing and product portfolio relative to competitors, the customer segments it will pursue, and how it will manage interactions with its suppliers. To drill this point home, this slide provides a simple comparison of 5 forces analysis and strategic positions. The role of the 5 forces model is to understand the industry dynamics that shape competition, that are strong enough to impact the performance of the firms within it. Alternatively, strategic positions describe how a particular firm will interact with those industry dynamics in order to carve out a place in the market that works for itself. The 5 forces model describes the industry's conditions, while strategic positions describe a firm's response to them. To be a bit more precise, a firm's strategic position describes its general go-to market strategy. It answers the big questions of what product and service portfolio will we offer, which customer segments will we target, how will we get our products and services in front of our customers, and which market segments will we pursue. 2 things to notice here. First, the product, customer, and market questions mimic the 3 ways we can define the term industry, as discussed in the lecture on industries. A strategic position describes how a firm will engage in its markets relative to its competitors. I'll address the 4th question about price and features combinations to a greater extent in the business strategies presentation later in the term. Second, by declaring answers to these 4 questions, a firm is declaring what it does not do. If the answers to the product, customer, and market questions are clear and definitive, the firm has set its boundaries. Circling all the way back to the beginning of this course, notice that SHE's declaration should be aligned with the firm's mission and vision statements. Let's use the industry of selling shoes as a simple example. The 4 firms here are all part of the same industry, so they could have drawn up the same 5 forces analysis, but they have established very different strategic positions. While I'm simplifying to an extent, Nordstrom primarily sells luxury and fashion shoes through its large format stores. DSW focuses its in-store locations on well-priced brand name shoes. Zappos provides a wide selection and free shipping through its website, and 6PM, the off-brand unit owned by Zappos, focuses on discount shoes. Each of them is a viable means to compete in the industry, despite their differences. That is, there is never just one best strategic position. Each firm can craft its own way to compete. One additional point here. Just about every industry is just one step in a long system of industries that turns raw materials or basic human expertise into products and services that are consumed by end users. We can describe the interactions that occur between these series of industries as a total value system of overlapped 5 forces models. Take breakfast cereal as an example. The cereal in your kitchen, at its very beginning, originated as wheat or corn grown by farmers. Farming is its own industry, with suppliers like seed companies and competition among farmers for attractive contracts with processors, who transform the grains into products like cereal. In other words, the production companies are the buyers with respect to farmers, and the farmers are the suppliers to the production companies. This overlap continues in the same way between producers and the grocery stores. An understanding of the connections that exist among the string of industries can be helpful to understanding how any one of the industries operates the way it does. The 5 forces model is fundamental to learning about strategy. It is one of the field's core models. While there are other frameworks for understanding industry dynamics, this is the most enduring. The necessary starting point for conducting a 5 forces analysis, or any other type of industry analysis, is clearly defining the industry. Without a tight definition, categorizing firms and dynamics into the 5 forces becomes blurry and confusing. Once defined, the analyst can start digging into the details of the forces, concentrating on those that have the strongest influence on industry profitability and noticing the nuances that exist within each. A good five forces model also considers any influence from factors such as governments and complementers, as well as the potential for innovations or disruptions to change the basis of competition in the industry. Once the five forces analysis is complete, strategic decision makers can use insights from it to craft strategic positions within the industry. The goal is to find a position for the firm that allows it to successfully navigate the forces in a way that puts it on solid footings. And that concludes this presentation.